So my name is Enora, and I'm with CIET. I'm also with Christian, Stephen, and Megan, who are going to introduce themselves just in a minute. And this is the third session of a workshop series we've put together to help energy managers at public organizations and municipalities to actively manage their energy. So just a note, you may have noticed that already, but we just wanted to let you know we are recording this session. So the objective of the workshop today is to provide a roadmap to finding and implementing savings with retrofits. It's going to be presented by Stephen, who I'll let introduce himself now.
Good morning, everybody. That's right. I'll be talking about a roadmap for retrofits. I'll also be talking about a few more things, including techniques for making and pitching the business case and treating energy efficiency retrofits as an investment. I've been an energy person for about 43 years now, working on energy audits and retrofits right across this country. So I had a lot of experience in different areas that are relevant to what we're doing today, but definitely focusing on building that business case. And speaking of the business case, I think we're going to have Megan talk about some of the incentives, right?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Murray. I'm going to be talking about incentives available through Save on Energy's Retrofit program, as well as some training incentives that are available through Save on Energy. And after that, we will hear from Christian with LAS. I'll let him introduce himself.
Excellent. Good morning, folks. My name is Christian. Work with LAS. That's the acronym for Local Authority Services. Been doing this for the last 7 years. Love what I do, and I will talk into details how we help municipalities regarding retrofit, and how the program basically help municipalities to save money and of course reduce GHG, in their facilities. So over to you, Stephen.
Great, thanks everybody. Just a quick note, we do have a chat there. I mean, you can open your mics, but we're going to ask you to keep your mics muted. Honora will help us to do that. But if there is a question at some point towards the end, we may be able to open your mic for that. Stick your questions into the chat there. Honora, Christian, Megan will keep an eye on that whenever they're not presenting, and I'll do the same thing. So we'll try to catch those questions as we go, and definitely try to catch them before we finish the workshop for the webinar today. So, all right, without much further ado, the one thing I always like to keep in mind when I talk about doing retrofit projects, a lot of times the focus is simply on energy, but in many cases, there are many other benefits for doing a good retrofit. I was in an aquatic center a little while ago, and it was interesting because one of the building operators was complaining that their pumps were chronically having to be rebuilt, the main circulating pumps on the pool. And Kristen, I think you were with me on that trip, and so we went down, took a look, and right beside the pump was a massive valve which was throttling the flow to the pump. And it turns out that when you do that with a pump, you do reduce its reliability, and it really destroys its efficiency. So coming out of that retrofit would be improved reliability on the pump, less wear and tear, definitely the direct energy savings, and probably easier to control that pool situation as well. So there's many benefits. When we get to the one-page proposal, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, which is actually a very succinct way to propose a retrofit, I ask people to think about all of these things, not just focus on the energy, because sometimes the energy can be minor in other people's minds. For that rink operator or the pool operator, and probably for their supervisor, the reliability of that pump was way more important in many ways, not with all due respect, than the energy, right? So we need to think about all those benefits. Now, there's no doubt today that when we think about energy use in a building, we have to think about the carbon side of it. And I always like to start when I do an energy audit or any kind of assessment of a facility with this picture here. I like to take the utilities, so I ask them for the gas and electricity bill. They give me the cost, and I put the pie chart together, and I go, whoa, it's like weighted towards electricity. Then I look at the energy side. Many buildings actually use about the same amount of energy in gas and electricity. Sometimes it steers away from that. But ultimately then, the real dichotomy here lies between the cost and the carbon, where on the carbon side of it, the natural gas. So when we think about retrofits, what I take away from this slide is that I have to think about both electricity and natural gas. I know we're all thinking about carbon and retrofitting to reduce carbon, but what we have to do is thinking about how we can retrofit to reduce electricity, make way for some of the electrification that takes place. And there's, Megan, you're going to talk a bit about some incentives to support that too, or some resources. But ultimately, when we electrify to reduce that carbon piece, we need to make room for that in our electricity. So that's why we have to focus on both electricity and natural gas. Let's not just be one-sided when it comes down to it. So that's a great graph to create. If anybody wants a spreadsheet to create that from your bills, it's a very simple one, but I can happy to share the one that I use all the time. Now, when it comes to the process, right, the process for approaching retrofits, it's really 4 key steps here. Assessment, that's where we do things like audits. Planning, that's where we try to sequence things properly, and especially when it comes to things like, as we're moving forward into this lower carbon future, electrification, there's going to be an order to doing these things properly, and I'm going to show that in that planning stage. Implementation, that involves things like securing the money, which, you know, Megan, you're going to talk to us about some of the incentives, but also Christian's going to talk to us about an end-to-end process for implementing energy projects that LAS supports. And that's a good example of a project retrofit or a retrofit project implementation process as well. So Christian will talk about that. Then I'll finish off on the maintenance piece, the commissioning, the proper commissioning and projects, the monitoring, and the training that has to go along with it. Again, there's support for that training from Save on Energy. There are basically 3 categories of retrofits. The minor ones, you know, maybe you've done a few of those, added a bit of insulation here, maybe upgrade a lighting system. The major ones, right, which is a much more holistic thing where we will do windows and doors and we'll change the heating system. And eventually that may give way to what we call a deep retrofit, a very extensive thing. Some of you municipalities out there are probably doing those deep retrofits, those low carbon assessments right now, those audits or studies where you're looking at basically making significant changes using heat pumps and renewables and integrating all that together. So really, I mean, you know, we can start slow too. That's one thing I always advocate. Start slow, and in your planning, sequence through these things too. You don't have to jump to the deep retrofit to begin with. As long as you understand, as we'll lay out today, the order, the critical order, then you can work your way through this in a maybe a progressive or a staged approach. So right now, I just want to get an idea of the folks out there. We've got 31 people online there. Just want to get an idea of how many of you are planning to do some of these things. So let's do a quick little poll here, and you can let us know, you know, how many of you are looking at minor, major, or deep retrofits. Honora, please.
Yeah, can you see it?
I can't see the poll. Oh, that's okay. I don't need to see the poll. Well, Kristen, if you can see the poll, I do need to see the poll at the end to sort of talk about the results. And maybe, Kristen, you can speak to the results because I can't see those right now.
That's fine. I can do that. We have minor retrofit 35% right now, major at 19, and deep retrofit at 27.
Wow.
Don't know 8%, and no retrofit 11%. So okay. The majority is in that 33%, which is majority is a minor retrofit. And when you come to deep, we have 29% that comes next.
But that's not far behind it, so that's really interesting, right? Because right. It's like people are seeing, okay, we're doing these smaller things, but then we're jumping to the deeper things for sure too. So exactly. Megan, you had your camera on there. Did you want to add something to that observation? Nope. Okay, good. I take the cameras.
And this is 28 responses, so majority have responded, you know.
Okay, excellent. Okay, great. And we like the camera on Kristen too. That's great. Wonderful. Don't turn it off. Don't be scared. I like to see cameras. I know there are people out there.
Okay, excellent. I'll be here. I'm right here.
No,
I'm with you.
I said Kristen, right? Kristen's down there. She's got her camera on, which is wonderthul. Thank you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That was me.
There's Sajeev. Hey, Sajeev. We had your video in the last one we did. Hey, welcome. Great retrofits in wastewater treatment plants. Sajiv's done some great retrofits over there in wastewater treatment plants. So excellent up in Sudbury. I think you're still in Sudbury, right, Sajeev? Yeah.
Good to see you, Sajeev. It's been a long while. Anyway, let's stay on track.
Let's go on. Yeah. So, you know, wastewater treatment plants aren't building, but they are facilities. And ultimately, right, a retrofit is, I think it's a necessary part of any building life cycle or any facility life cycle. It's not like it's an abnormal thing to do, and we need to see it as being part of that life cycle. So having said that, we have to think about our asset planning for that that building too, right? So what is the life cycle? What are the things that we go through? You know, we may retrofit the building because simply because it doesn't meet its purpose today, but we can take every opportunity then to insert into those other retrofits than the energy retrofits themselves, in addition to that deep retrofit that some of you are already thinking about. So again, it's a process, right? It's not a one-time thing, it's a process, and we could see multiple retrofits potentially in a building over time staged. In terms of the process that I'm sort of going through here, it's really the process that is advocated in these guides. There's one of them called Principles, right? This one right here, Major Energy Retrofit Guidelines from Natural Resources Canada. These are actually pretty meaty books or guides. Have a look at them. There's a link at the bottom there. The Principles one actually is good because it kind of lays out the big picture, basically applies to any facility. And then there's one for office buildings. Some of the, obviously you don't run supermarkets in municipalities, but definitely the office building ones, and I think there's another one in there too. But have a look at least those two. I think you'll find some really good material, and you'll definitely see the process that we're talking about going through here today. But, when it comes to things like refrigeration, the supermarkets, right? So, I wish there was one for rinks because that's a huge opportunity within municipalities. But have a look at some of the other ones because there may be some systems that are common to your facilities in those other maybe non-municipal types of facilities. So there's a great suite of books there. Take a look at those. All right. So in terms of this process, assessing, planning, implementing, and maintaining, I'm going to sort of kind of walk through these. And my purpose today, I'm keeping an eye on my time, is not necessarily to actually get into all the details. What I really want to do is make way for the, giving you an opportunity to see what support there is from Save on Energy, but also seeing what LAS is doing in this way. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but I encourage you to go back and take a look at least that Principles book because it walks through these 12 points underneath each of these 4. So establishing commitment. This is really important. We often see organizations where someone who is in a relatively, I don't say minor role, but someone who doesn't have authority in the organization to do some of these things is really committed to energy. But this is where we need to get the entire organization. I say that, not just the senior person, but people all the way through to support that process. You got to have project management, environmental people, even for that matter, the folks that control training in your organization, because I've seen so many retrofits that didn't work as well as they could have because people weren't trained in understanding. So getting commitment for the entire organization is very important. Benchmarking is foundational. I don't need to say a lot about that today. Most of you are involved in that through the EWRB, right, and using things like Portfolio Manager and EPT from LAS. So there's lots of benchmarking tools out there. It gives you an idea of where you are to begin with. And this building is at 81, an Energy Star building. Now, could it do better? Of course it can. When I do an audit, one of the things I think about, and this 7 steps process, start with understanding costs, comparisons, benchmarking, looking at my profiles when I use energy, where it's all going in the facility, building that inventory. Most audits would do this. And then I go through looking for opportunities. So getting rid of waste, energy we don't need to use, improving the efficiency, and then optimizing the supply. Some people have said, hey, Steve, that's the path to net zero, those last 3 steps. And it is, right? The opportunities, the last one is optimizing the supply, looking for the best form of supply, the renewables, the heat pumps, the heat recovery, right? And then the efficiency of the equipment, and maybe heat pumps fit in that category too for you. So ultimately, right, there's an organized approach to doing this. We don't want to have a wasteful building, right, and inefficient equipment, and then go looking for heat pumps and renewable energy. So the order here is very important. And that will come out in another slide here coming out soon. Now, getting audits done. It's very important to get the right person to do your audits. I've seen a lot of municipalities send me an audit when we go to do some workshops there, and they say, we don't really like this audit. Well, we spent money on this thing. Let's get a good audit. So I think it's worth spending some time and really scoping your audits properly, right? Understanding what's required. If you need some coaching around this is a good example, Megan, right? Because there's coaching through the Save on Energy program. So if you need some coaching on maybe some guidance on how to write a specification for an audit, that's something that Save on Energy can help you with. Reach out to the folks at Save on Energy, and Megan will talk about where you do that, and make sure you get really, really good value for your money out of your audit. And ultimately, it's going to come down to the person delivering that audit, but also how that person interacts with your staff in the building. And then eventually, I'm going to talk about presenting it good financially as well. So planning. And this is the key diagram here, right? And this actually speaks to many of the programs that are available from Save on Energy. Now, the only thing that I don't like about this diagram, I like many things about it, but the one thing I don't like is it has 5 steps, and the center one says supplemental load reduction. That is a picture of a computer. I would rather have a building in there, right? So basically, we can do existing building commissioning. That's the first step. That's where we take and get house in order. And then we look at doing lighting upgrades, right? Which is where we can make room in our electrical system for more loads. We can reduce the air conditioning load and so on. Then other things that reduce load in the building is the third step. And that's where I would put things like building envelope, right? And, making computers, more efficient and maybe not wasteful on computers, but basically all the things that contribute to the heating, cooling load in the building. So that third step should be all those things that contribute to the building heating, cooling load, not the least of which is the building envelope. And then we can look at doing, what we call air distribution system upgrades. So looking at the systems within the building that distribute the energy for heating and cooling, and then the systems that actually provide the heating and cooling. So ultimately, the idea here is we don't want to jump to that 5th step without considering all these other things first to make sure that, that the size of the new system we're going to put in there, if it's a heat pump system, or maybe it's a renewable energy system, the size of it's going to depend on all the other things that go beforehand. Not the least of which are things like building envelope and lighting systems and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's a very important order to this. And again, that guide does a really good job of laying that out and actually speaking about the fact that building envelope has to fit within that sequence properly. I know it's expensive to do building envelope, but it's worth thinking about it. There's a great program for existing building commissioning. That's where we get house in order. We've actually done existing building commissioning, treasure hunts and things like that recently, where we're getting like 10, 20, 25% reduction in carbon and cost. So those are not insignificant things. They're setting the stage for all the further retrofits that are coming down the road. Then we can look at things like lighting upgrades. Christian, you're going to talk about lighting upgrades and an end-to-end process for doing these. And there's still opportunity out there because just swapping lamps isn't necessarily a lighting upgrade. Really making a better lighting system which delivers better results for occupants is where it's at, right? So we can do more. And remember, lighting systems only last 5 to 10 years, right? When you think about it. So in that process of building renewal, we got to think about this and always getting the most efficient system. We do that. IT and plug load reduction, right? Now, this is interesting because we were doing some work in some other provinces actually just yesterday. And one of the things we came upon was the fact that, as the IT load builds in a building, so do the requirements for cooling in the building, but also the impact on the heating systems as well. So being able to sort of really manage that internal load in the building is really important. It also has impact on your overall electricity requirement. If we're going to electrify, we need to make sure we have we control that growth of electricity load in the building, whether it's due to those servers, which is a bit of an exaggeration, or just all the little things that people bring into the building and use electricity. And then there's the building envelope. And again, I can't stress, think about the building envelope. Even though these things are expensive, there are some probably basic things we can do, and they have a direct impact on the amount of heating and cooling energy required. So when you're considering that deep retrofit and that, well, when you talked about those deep retrofits or the low carbon retrofits, we definitely have to think about the building envelope somewhere in that sequence. Maybe not the first thing we do, but we need to plan to do that effectively. So finally, it brings us to that whole idea of upgrading the HVAC systems and replacing what's there. There's lots of opportunities here. Again, this is not the workshop where we're going to dive into the detail. We'll have some future ones coming on. There's some great resources available from Save on Energy around efficient electrification. We talk about heat pump systems and all the intricacies of doing those kinds of retrofits, right? But one of the things that we noticed, I'm going to just touch on the top line there. A lot of times people, have those rooftop units. Those are things that we just install and forget. And we even install and forget them when they're heat pumps. But those things can use a lot of energy and operate very inefficiently if we forget them. And that's often where, when we look at existing building commissioning, we'll focus on those things because there's a lot of opportunity in those systems. So making sure that as we build into the future, we build in a way that we don't install and forget those. Good practice within retrofits. In that guide, there's a great set of checklists, right? And it takes you through from benchmarking to the deep retrofit opportunities. So have a look at those guides. There's lots of ideas of things we can do, and also building in some of the human factors in there as well, like engagement with staff and so on. And that's always part, even though it's not a retrofit, to me, you've got to consider that in your journey towards a deep retrofit. So when it comes to the financial side of this thing, I often see I see so many reports that say, install this heat pump, the simple payback is 12 years. Or install the heat pump, maybe the simple payback is 3 years because you've got oil, right? So say you're using oil in a little municipality in Ontario and that's all you have, or propane. Installing a a heat pump can have significant impact. But measuring the value of that heat pump in simple payback, that is as an investment, that's not an investment, right? When you sit in front of your investment advisor with your portfolio, you know, you're going to say, hey, I want to review my portfolio, my retirement portfolio. Do they tell you, well, the simple payback on the investments we made last year was this? No, they don't tell you that. They tell you the interest rate that you're getting, or the effective interest rate for your portfolio. That's kind of like the internal rate of return or the modified internal rate of return. So if you look at this example here, I have a project that has a 2-year simple payback. Okay, well, that sounds pretty attractive. But would you like an investment that over 10 years gave you 55%? How many of you would like that in your investment portfolio? I certainly would, right? I have nowhere near that, right? So the idea here is that it may just be that for any organization, whether it's personally in my home or you and your municipalities or elsewhere, energy efficiency may be one of the best investments we can make into the future, right? But being able to evaluate these things properly is important. That's the spreadsheet that I use. Happy to share that with folks. Some of you probably already seen that one before. But again, my email will be at the end. I'd be happy to share that spreadsheet. But then if you use the tool called RetScreen, which Megan was quick to point out yesterday is both a technical analysis tool. So all the things I've talked about before, you can technically analyze that. And Megan, you'll reference the fact that I think Save on Energy even accepts this now as the calculation tool for retrofit applications, right? And what's wonderful about it is once you get the technical answer, then you can drive out a financial answer where you can calculate the benefit to cost ratio, savings to investment ratio, the net present value, all those things that the chief financial officer or that person from a financial perspective making decisions would like to see. And you can even dial in, integrate into your financial analysis the incentives, right? And also the carbon credits and things like that as well. So ultimately, you know, the great tool there, have a look at it. It also has in its virtual energy analyzer a lot of really neat little ideas about, okay, you can open it up and you say, I want to see what a municipal building, I want to see what an arena, what they could do in an arena to take an arena to a 95% less carbon. Well, there's an example in there. It's called the virtual energy analyzer. Follow your nose through that one, and it's surprising what you'll find. And you can access a lot of these features even without a license. So you can go and download this. So actually, I just saw a little question pop up there talking about the balance between cost and carbon. That's an interesting one, Robert. Robert Smith just asked about the balance between cost and carbon. Yeah, that's definitely something that I would do here. I think, Robert, what you're talking about is that if you do, say, a deep retrofit, you may not get, in order to get to low carbon, you may not get an NPV or an IRR that's even high, like I talked about a little bit earlier. I think that's what you're talking about. What I do there, and Kristen can talk to this one too, we actually have a workshop on life cycle costing where I evaluate three streams, like do nothing, right? Do a significant energy retrofit or do a net zero retrofit. And we show that over the life, right, even considering all the costs, right, the increased cost for going to the low carbon or the net zero retrofit, that the carbon piece and actually some of the maintenance actually offset that in the long run. And the lowest life cycle cost tends to be, and Kristen has a great example you could probably share at some point, of a fire hall that was basically built for low carbon and ended up having the lowest life cycle cost being the net zero option. So Robert, hopefully that answers your question. You definitely have to trade that off. And there is a difference. Yeah, that's the point. Thank you, Rob. There is a difference between energy efficiency and carbon efficiency. And that's where I went back to that first slide that I had on slide 4 there, right? Which was the pie charts. You think about carbon efficiency, how you spend your money to reduce carbon versus how you spend your money to improve efficiency. That's an important piece, but life cycle costing is the way to do that.
Right. I agree. 100%.
Yeah. And we have a tool like that one. We have a tool for that one. And I think we're going to integrate that one into the future session here. We have a session on investment analysis or financial analysis for energy. We're going to do life cycle costing. So we'll come back and we'll share that tool with you too. So speaking of money, Megan, over to you. I'll let you share your screen and we're right on time.
You are on mute, Megan.
Thank you. Just talking away. All right, an important part of the planning stage is the consideration of incentives to support your projects. I'm going to briefly introduce the Save on Energy Retrofit program, how it works, and the incentive potential available that you might want to include when developing those business cases. that Stephen was discussing just now. So what is the retrofit program? Incentives are available to municipal facilities. This could include offices, libraries, and any facility that has a commercial account through a utility that's connected to the ISO grid. This could also include multifamily sites such as social housing or assisted living facilities, any emergency services centers, and even your water and wastewater treatment facilities. Types of projects that are eligible are generally those that provide sustainable, measurable, and verifiable reductions in peak demand or energy consumption, electricity consumption specifically. This can include lighting, HVAC controls, refrigeration, motors, VFDs, compressed air system upgrades. And thanks to the reintroduction of the custom stream in the program, if you can show that your project does produce peak demand or electricity savings, the type of project that you're doing is not strictly limited. So I'm going to talk about the two different streams that there are, prescriptive and custom, under this program. There are distinctions between them and each has their own benefits. So you should decide which is most appropriate for your project and your priorities. The prescriptive stream is much simpler and often quicker, but it's limited by the measure offering. So there's set incentive rates for common retrofits. You don't have to do any calculations on your own, and you don't have to do any M&V following your project installation. The custom track, however, offers incentives on the actual savings generated by your project, but it does require extra work on your part where you do have to calculate those savings. And like I said, you can use RETScreen to do that. And you might also have to do M&V to verify those savings once you've completed the project. Also, a quick note that regardless of which stream you apply under, you might be selected for what's called QA/QC. This just ensures that the funds are being spent on projects that do in fact generate savings. So it generally requires that you have before and after photos of your project. Sometimes it could require that one of the program administrators comes to your facility and just evaluates the work that was done. They might count the measures that were installed for things like lighting, or they might look at your BAS and make sure that everything's operating the way that it was intended as part of the project application. There is a pretty simple process to apply for the retrofit program. One thing to keep in mind at all times is apply before you buy. Every project requires a pre-approval through this program. There's also a lot of support and information guides available on the retrofit program website, which is just saveonenergy.ca/retrofit. There's applications, checklists, tips, guides, and best practices. First step is to sign up for the retrofit portal. There's also an instruction guide and even videos on how to do this, because people did find it a little bit tricky when they first launched that portal. Once you have your account set up, you can submit your application documents. Sometimes contractors will actually do this step on your behalf. They can act as what's known as an applicant representative. And if they do that, you still need your own account. You have to log in, you have to review what they've submitted and review the participant agreement and agree to the terms there. And then shortly after, you will receive via email a project pre-approval. Once you've received that pre-approval, you can complete your project and then prepare and submit your post-project details. At this point, you'll have to definitely include invoices and proof of payments. And then depending on the nature of your project or the stream you applied under, there might be some M&V requirements or QA/QC requirements. The reviewers of the program will let you know if either of those things are required. And if there's any information missing for them to be able to evaluate your incentive application, then they will communicate that with you. And it's usually quite simple to resolve. Whoops. Then you get your post-approval. They confirm the incentive amount that you're eligible for. You then create an invoice and upload it to the portal, and then they will cut you a check for that incentive amount you've been approved for. There have been a lot of changes to this program over the years, so I'm going to quickly try to cover off some of those. Like I mentioned earlier, the custom track had been eliminated for a little while, but it was reintroduced earlier this year. They also have an updated incentive structure, so they've increased a lot of the incentives. Some of the rates for the custom track used to be 10 cents per kilowatt hour or $800 per kilowatt. You can see those have now increased up to $1,200 per kilowatt of peak demand savings, or 13 cents per kilowatt hour. And then based on your project, whichever of those two values is the higher is what your incentive will be. There used to be a $1 million incentive cap. That doesn't exist anymore, but they do still cap incentives at half of your project costs. There's also increases to the network lighting control incentives. These are offered under the prescriptive track. They used to be based on a per square foot dollar value. They're now based on energy savings. And then again, a lot of increases to non-lighting measures under the prescriptive track that they've doubled the incentives. In some case, they've tripled or even quadrupled. There's also big changes coming for lighting. So actually, just about a week from now, the last day to apply for lighting projects in the retrofit program is coming up. And they're going to be transitioning lighting incentives over to an instant discount program where they actually provide the incentives to suppliers, and then you get like a point of sale discount. So again, the retrofit program website is linked. There's a ton of information there for you to browse. And here are some examples of some of the prescriptive measures and the dollar values associated with them. We really wanted to point out like how much money is available now. So there's air source heat pumps available for commercial facilities of various sizes from 20 to over 60 tons. There's new incentives for scroll compressors, $240 per horsepower. Incentives for circulator pumps with ECM motors have all quadrupled, along with compressed air variable displacement compressors. Demand control ventilation for enclosed parking also has had significant increases. Unitary air conditioning units have also increased. And VFDs specifically, I would like to point out, so the 150 horsepower VFD previously was just under $10,000 per VFD installed. It's now almost $30,000. So that's like a tripling. Same with the 500 horsepower that used to be $350. It's now over $1,000. So there's a whole list of these prescriptive measures and the values associated with them that you can find on the website.
Megan, there's a question. How do we know that the suppliers are passing on the discount to municipalities or to applicants?
That's a good question. So this is a newer type of program offering. We've seen it happen in HVAC before, especially for things like demand control ventilation, some refrigeration type of measures. I think that these suppliers are actually very upfront about the discount, and they actually set that discount themselves. So it actually also just enables a little bit of competition in their own markets if how they decide to spend that incentive money and how much of it they choose to pass on as an instant discount. I think if you're really planning a retrofit, maybe check out some of the prices or get some quotes right now, and then it's probably, you know, the deadline's too soon for you to apply within the next week, but check out the prices again in a few weeks' time and see what that looks like.
Oh, thank you. That came from Kyle. Is that right? Yeah, Kyle. Okay, thank you.
I'll try to follow up on that in our email later too. Okay, lastly, we have some extra incentives available for certain regions in Ontario. So you can actually check if your facilities are eligible by the postal code by looking up your postal codes on the website. These are typically Niagara region, Kingston area, Southern Huron, Pembroke, Kenora, Wabashani, Barrie, Muskoka, Elmira, and Peterborough. And onto the training course incentives. So Save on Energy also, like I said, offers up to 50% incentives for over 20 training courses. List as an example is here: Achieving Net Zero Buildings, Energy Management and the ISO 50001 standard, HVAC optimization for high performance buildings, the Certified Energy Manager program, and the CMVP. There's a link here if you want to peruse the whole list of eligible training programs. And if you're also an Enbridge customer, you can actually get an added discount, so up to 75% incentive for the courses called the Dollars to Cents workshops, Certified Sustainable Building Operator, and the Certified Energy Manager.
One thing I should mention, Megan, on the Dollars to Cents workshop, two things. One is actually any of these incentives, you actually don't apply beforehand. You simply fill in the application afterwards with the signatures of all the people who participated. When it comes to the Dollars to Cents, that's a very customizable stream. So basically, we deliver a lot of those. You've come to me and say, I want to do Dollars to Cents. Christian actually works with me on that one. We can customize. I know some of you out there have received this, but we can cut. It's not a set curriculum. You can tell me exactly what you want to achieve in the training, and we will design and build the training for that purpose. That's all part of it. So it's very specific to your operations.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the programs LAS does, offer as well. I know we've spoken about them at other webinars, but just so you know, if there's any training program, whether it's on net zero, whether it's building efficiency, whether it's whatever you want to do, just very customized, and sure, you get 75% of it paid back to you. So 25% will be your out-of-pocket cost, which I think from a financial point of view is a no-brainer training incentive,
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for pointing out those things. I have one last slide to get through, and then I'm going to pass it back to Stephen. So this webinar that we're in right now is part of Save on Energy's capability building program, and we are developing a lot of training and resources that's available for free. It's funded by Save on Energy. So stay tuned for updates about more capability building initiatives by visiting saveonenergy.ca/training and support. One last note, Stephen mentioned earlier, if you're interested in coaching, you can simply email trainingandsupport@iso.ca, and I'll put that in the chat, and just reach out to us and we will get back in touch. Thanks very much, and I will stop sharing and pass it back to Stephen.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, there's lots of resources, so keep checking back on that website on the capability building. And there's even going to be some really neat resources around efficient electrification, which I know a lot of people are interested in. So, all right. So what I'm going to do now is just take a few minutes and talk about, you've got your projects lined up, you've got them sequenced properly, you've got some good incentives for them. Now you've got to make that pitch to actually get the money to do them. And it's not always a slam dunk when these things. A lot of people see energy projects are very attractive, but still you've got to get that positive decision. So one thing I like to do when I'm looking for approval for a project is to think about all the questions in advance that I'm going to get asked about that project before I create that proposal, whatever form it might take. And I see really there's three gates you have to pass through. There's the operational gate, right, which basically says, can we build this? I know, in examples of wastewater treatment plant where, we can't take the old plant offline before we put the new plant in place. So basically we have to parallel. So there's some real practical aspects that could, actually take a project off the rails or make it a rejected project. Actually, the one thing I should mention, if there's ever a way to make a project non-discretionary, that is, if there's a regulation that applies that will then say this project has to be done and it has an energy or carbon benefit as well, that's really good. But for discretionary projects, this is kind of the decision process. Then there's financial criteria. I talked a little bit about that one earlier, doing the proper financial analysis, making it look like showing the financial investment properly. And in the terms of the people that are making the decision too, one thing, again, I like to do is to go and speak to my financial people and say, hey, listen, how do you want to see this presented? What are you looking for? What should I use for a discount rate if I'm going to do a present value analysis? What should I use for an inflation rate? That way, when the analysis comes in, right, they're going to go, okay, that looks pretty good, and it's done properly. Finally, the strategic fit. I think today there's a lot of strategic fit for municipalities with low carbon retrofits, energy efficient retrofits. But again, going back and checking on those things, making sure it all fits together. This applies to any organization, but I think in the municipal world today, most municipalities are really committed to that low carbon future, to that more sustainable approach. So there's definitely strategic fit there. And ultimately, if you provide a convincing case as to why we should do this from all these points of view, then there's a good chance you're going to get an approval, right? That's optimistic thinking. But yes, I think you can get approval. The one way to, I think, increase the probabilities you're going to get an approval is to use what I call a one-page proposal to kind of socialize your projects or your retrofits. This could be done on a particular project, or it could be done on a massive retrofit. I remember a person that came to a workshop years ago where I presented the idea around the one-page proposal, and her boss had said a 40-page proposal was too long. She came back with a 6-page. He says that was still too long, and she didn't know what she was going to do. And then next day she came to a workshop, and I showed her how to create a one-page proposal. She went back. She wrote the one-page proposal. 3 days later, she had approval for $140,000 worth of work. And he said, I want to do this at 6 other sites too. So boom, it does work. So I'm not going to go through the details of the one-page proposal today. There is a book. I didn't write it. Patrick Riley wrote it. I don't get any consideration for it. If you want, and we'll definitely include this in further webinars, I can definitely provide you with a template for a one-page proposal, the things we can send to you, and some examples of how they're written. But literally what you see on the screen there is what it's all about. It's broken down into essentially 6 key areas. There's a title and a subtitle. And if you look at the one here, it says, let's clear the air. This is about a building that they had problems with fume control in a science building in a university, addressing ventilation fume control needs at University of Yorktown. So it's kind of like a newspaper or magazine article. It's meant to attract people's attention, drag them in, lock them in. Then we talk about the target and the secondary targets, right? That's where you're really setting, this is what this is going to do. The neat thing I like about this example I have on the screen here, if you can read it, under the target, it talks about different things that can benefit. But only the 5th thing down the list is reduce energy expenses. They don't start talking about energy until the 4th and the 5th line in the targets. What are the things that are going to happen? And the last one, it's creatively written and attract, like a magnet, attract an upfront incentive equal to the first year savings. Rather than saying 31,000, it's like it's going to match the first year savings. So when you write a one-page proposal, creative writing is really important, because that's where that paragraph in the center, or a couple of paragraphs, really make that pitch for why we should do this. And then we follow up with the financials, right? The status today, create a bit of urgency, and then it wouldn't be a proposal without a call to action. What do you want? So, cut us a purchase order, give us approval, start the project management process, whatever. We have to have that call to action there. The one-page proposal. If you've got proposals that maybe didn't fly, take one of them out off the back burner there and say, hey, listen, can we actually bring this one back to life? Try to create a one-page proposal. It's worth a look for a few minutes. Seen it be used very successfully. Finally, okay, so you've got your approval. Now you got to implement. A good project management process is key. Even, I've actually seen, outside of retrofits of physical things in buildings, I've actually seen organizations implementing a management system. And the key thing to implementing a management system properly, like ISO 14 or 9000 or 50001 for energy, is a project management process, right? And communication is the key to all of that, right? So just because you're doing a small project doesn't necessarily mean you can sort of shortcut this process. All of these stages are important, and eventually I'm going to talk a little bit about the monitoring stage too. Megan, you talked about M&V might be required for some projects. I think M&V is required, measurement verification is required for all projects, because the best way to get the money for the next project, regardless of whether the incentive body wants it, is to demonstrate the results from this project. That makes it a lot easier to ask for more money, because you're already showing the return on what they've invested previously. All right, so rather than me going through a project management process, what I'd like Christian to do now is to present their lighting retrofit service as an example of a implementation process. And he's got a nice end-to-end diagram in there. Okay,
exactly.
Christian?
Thank you, Stephen. Just like Stephen said, we are at the implementation stage now. What do you do? And we're talking basically about lighting retrofit, because that's what we do. LAS is our local authority services. I said that earlier on. We are non-for-profit, and we work under the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. So if you are a municipality online today, or if you're a non-for-profit organization, online today, or if you're a broader public sector, sure, give us that call and we can work with you in terms of your lighting retrofit. We were designed, to help municipalities and all these institutions that I've alluded to earlier on. And when you use our services, you do not have to do an RFP, and I'll talk more about that later. So what do we do, and how does our service work, and how many municipalities have we, helped so far? All facilities, but these are some of the key long-term cares we've done. Actually, there's a funny story. In COVID, we're working in a long-term care in Lambton County. Yeah, a true story. And the contractors, got upset. Well, the workers of the contractor got upset because they will have to be tested every day before they go into the facility. They say, why on earth are we going through this? But long-term cares, we've done it. Municipal offices, libraries and town halls, public works, tons of public works we've worked with municipalities on, transit garages, community centers. Baseball diamonds have become the most popular of late. We've got about 5 baseball diamonds on the go currently, and we know there's more to come. So if you have any of these facilities and you're considering doing a retrofit, we are your person to call to. We make it very easy for you, because one of the purposes that the association set us up was to make sure that municipalities are able to save money by participating in our program, and they are also able to reduce time. I mean, like, take this off their plate and focus on other things. So saving time. So this is the process. High-level financial analysis, net present value, internal rate of return, saving to investment ratio. In other words, this I'll call step 1. Is a high-level project proposal that we're going to do for you. Free of charge, we don't charge money. We've got the experts that we've retained that do it. We don't charge you a cent for it. We do it for you. So we give you a project proposal. You get to know, okay, it's going to cost me X amount to retrofit my arena, or X amount to retrofit my ball diamond, or whatever facility it is. Then and we show you all the financial indicators regarding costs, and if you do it today, when are you going to get your money back in terms of internal rate of return? We'll show you all that kind of information. Once we've done that, if we see there's a level, we do it free of charge, of course, at that point. But at that point, if we see there's a level of commitment from you to proceed with us as LAS, then we do an on-site lighting survey, whereby our service provider that we work with, come on site, have a look at the facility, does an on-site inspection, and come up with a refined budget proposal that gives you some definitives in terms of cost. How much is it going to cost you? Because at step 1, you will just feed us with the information. We send you a spreadsheet and you do your count and you give it to us, then we give you the project proposal. So it's more or less a desktop project proposal, but then you can work with it to extent. But after the on-site lighting survey, you get a very refined project proposal to work with. At this level, if there is a total commitment to work with us, then we move on to the next stage. And like Stephen said in one of his slides earlier, lighting retrofit is not just taking old lights and put new lights there. 2 things can happen. Either you're going to overlight the area, overlight or underlight. Two end results could happen. So we do a lighting design, engineering lighting design that complies with IES standards, and make sure that you have the right lighting level for the particular facility you're talking about. So with that, then together with the proposal, then we do the incentive application on your behalf. Well, as of 18th of this month, we will not be doing any incentive application. But as I'm speaking, I've got tons of projects that we need to make sure we put it in before the 17th. And the last time I checked the calendar, that was yesterday. 17th is a Sunday. So my Saturday is going to be very busy on the 16th. I will not have a Saturday. I'll be sitting there just inputting, incentive applications. Then we do the installation, of course, and the commissioning. One thing I need to note here, if you use, or not if, let me change my language. When you use our service, this is not single sourcing. It is not single sourcing because as a municipality, you have a procurement bylaw that supports cooperative, like a corporate organization, cooperative purchasing. And as a result of that, the RFP that we have done in order to retain a service provider to work with, you can piggyback on that RFP. So it's not single sourcing, and I need to say it loud and clear because we always get municipalities come to us. Is this single sourcing? I had a whole team of senior staff from a municipality meeting with them, and they had their procurement specialist, wanting to check whether our program was legit, so to speak. And in the middle of the meeting, he just stopped there and said, no, what Christian is offering, or what LAS is offering is is above board and their municipality can participate in it. So it is not single sourcing. All that we've done is we've done as a mother association, municipal association, we've done an RFP on your behalf, so you do not need to do an RFP. Right, next slide, please, Steven. So just a few examples of some of the facilities I spoke about earlier. And retrofit truly does save money. Retrofit is not just, here we go. I mean, we did a 128 in our long-term care facility in Haldeman. This is Haldeman. I saw a few Haldeman County staff register for this webinar. I'm not sure if they are out there. If they are out there, a shout out to them for allowing us to, work with them. This was way back in 2018. But then, as you can see, 60% reduction in their energy costs. So energy plus maintenance is close to 70,000 that they waste. This is actual money, which goes towards reducing your operating costs in the facility, and the internal rate of return almost 30%. That is super good. If you want to put it in simple terms, your payback will be under 5 years. And mind you, councillors love that. Councillors love projects with a payback that is under 5 years. Now, we did Peterborough Memorial Center. It's their premier facility for two of their leagues, lacrosse and the hockey league also goes on here. Light levels were terrible at the time. They called us in, and as you can see, the before and the after photos. And the next slide, please, tells about the savings, 45% reduction. So in a year, they're able to bank 15,000 or close to 16,000 just off, out of their line item in their budgeting, because of the fact that they retrofitted. So retrofit truly does save money. And of course, a shout out to the IESO, give us money close to 7,000 to do it. And it's still going to be here. The incentives are still going to be here. Well, maybe there's a time frame. IESO will give details on it, but for now it is here. And generally, you get 10 to 15% of your project costs being paid through incentives. And if you're a municipality, you are not for profit, you don't make money, you depend on tax or residence tax payment to make money. So every cent truly does count. Every cent count in that regard. With a Kenora aquatic pool also, T5s used to be the light of the day at the time, but no, it's no longer. We retrofitted the T5s and slash energy consumption, to almost less than 60%, from almost 100 to 35 kilowatts per annum annual consumption, and saved money as well, and had a payback of under 5 years as well. So the next slide, please. So program statistics, what have we done so far? Over 120 projects completed, from community centers to municipal offices, town halls, arenas. And in terms of savings, cumulative savings on behalf of municipalities, over 1 million. Over 1 million. And this is not kind of a high, but it's fact. I reconcile the spreadsheet on all the savings on every project, and when I do the sum up, I see 1 million and over. So municipalities are saving money, and that's the 40 municipalities that have participated. If you are out there, next slide, please. If you're out there and you're interested and you surely want to, hey, this makes your job easier. I used to work as an energy manager with a municipality, and at the time I didn't know of this LAS program. So as an energy manager, one of the things I was in charge of was retrofit. So I'll be chasing contractors, I'll be doing RFPs, I'll be doing everything. A week after, I'll get a complaint the lights are off because they were offshore products. When you use our program, you cut all those things out, especially the IFP, which is a true pain for municipal staff. Small to medium-sized municipalities, it's a pain for them. They have so many things doing. But when you use us, you cut all those processes off, and we truly save you time and help you to save money. So the first step is to give me a call. Then the other steps followed in the diagram, as I say. So call me, email me, tell me you have these facilities you want to convert to LED. Sure, I'll hand that over to our service provider through the spreadsheet you complete and send. Then we'll take it from there. Sure, Stephen, I see your hand up.
Well, actually, Michael Reed asked a question about whether the lighting service is conducted under the direction of a PN or an architect, because that's required for building certification under an Energy Star. I think you do have an engineer working on the lighting that, when you do the design, correct?
Yeah, we do. Exactly, we do, Michael. And I thought that I saw a question from Robert as well. I thought Robert Smith, was there a question? It's trying to focus, but at the same time, couldn't read.
No, I think the point he is making is about that by dealing with the lighting thing, reducing your electricity costs before you're tackling the carbon reduction.
Right.
So I mean, it seems like we've done a lot on lighting in the past, but there's still lots of room, and it makes room for that electrification piece. I think that was Robert's point there. So.
Exactly.
Great.
Sure. So folks, give me that call, and sure, let's work together to help you save money and reduce the operating costs in your facilities. Over to you, Stephen.
Great. We're just about to finish. I see Nora turning her camera on there. So we'll wrap this one up pretty quickly. We could spend all day talking about the importance of commissioning and handing off a project, right, to the folks in the building. One of the things I'm going to say on that point is before you start the project, involve your building operators. I spent the last 2 days talking to folks in buildings who are left with systems that they didn't have input into how they were designed. And the building operator is so knowledgeable of what a building, how it works, how it ticks, all the subtleties. And when you're doing those retrofits, that's incredibly valuable information. So please, in addition to handing off properly to the building operator, make sure you allow them to hand off to you. That is be there at the initiation of a project, a really important piece, right? But then making sure that you take advantage of training that's available, because some of that new equipment may require some particularly new skills, and that's where again the Save on Energy training and support program can come into play. Not just dollars to cents, which is the 75%, but many other types of training in there as well. So please have a look at that, because that ensures that the investment you've made actually is going to realize the savings. And I've seen it many times when they don't. How we see that is by doing some good monitoring. Here's an example of a real building, right? Over the period of 4 years, 2014 to 2018, they made some significant retrofits. What was interesting in this building is they didn't monitor at the time. They felt that they were saving money. When I went back and I showed them what the benefit that they had done, they started to do more things, right? Because like I said, the best way to get more money is to demonstrate the money you've already delivered. So I did a number of measures, but rather than listing the measures on the slide, what I did was I took and I generated with my tool called RedScreen. This is the QSUM slide, which a CFO has once described as an indisputable visual of the results. The chief financial officer said this graph was an indisputable visual of the results, right? And it shows it's downturning, and it shows that this building has saved more than almost 1.4 million kilowatt hours over that 4-year period. And we can track, right, the improvements to the different actions that they took within the building. And we can do the same thing on the natural gas side. So we weren't trading out back and forth. This building made real significant reductions in gas and electricity consumption that are directly attributable to the different projects they do. You can do this. You can do this. It's not guesswork. You can actually demonstrate your results. And eventually you might have to if you get enough money from the ISO, because there is what's called a measurement verification requirement. So a great process. Right? I think the title says it all, a roadmap to savings, but also a roadmap to the future. And we have to think of these things. It's not a once and done thing. The retrofit process, right, is an ongoing process. We will continue in the life cycle of our buildings, right, to have to renew things. And what we need to do is effectively build the energy and the carbon piece into that so that we can take a nice smooth road to the future. Over to you, Nora. I think we've taken lots of questions so far, so we're good, unless we have any more.
Yeah. So, as we are running out of time, and anyway, as you said, Stephen, you have answered a few questions along the webinar, so that's great. But if you have any question unanswered, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Can you go to the final slide, Stephen? So there is this email, your training and support at iso.ca. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if there is anything. So let's conclude.